Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. We'll be talking about NAB's actions. We've been following, of course, I'm sure you've also been looking at how NAB has been trying to get to Shehbaz Sharif Saab and the bail that followed, also Murad Ali Shah Saab, and how the rope of accountability seems to be tightening on the opposition. What is behind this? What does the government hope to achieve? Is it just accountability, or are there some underlying issues? We'll be talking about that. We'll also be talking about the coronavirus and its spread all over. Of course, the numbers are on the rise. We'll be talking about social responsibility, how the society is dealing with it, what are some of the do's and don'ts that really need to be addressed even as we go on, even as things continue to worsen as far as the numbers are concerned, as they continue to rise, the death toll also. Of course, the good news is that we have the patient recovery rate is also something that is something to be optimistic about, but at this time it's clearly a cause for concern, should be a cause for concern for every individual. We'll be talking about that also. Moving to the NAB, I have with me today Mahrukh Hameed Pansota, who is an eminent lawyer, a legal expert. Thank you for joining us today. We'll also be joined by Ibrahim Khan, who's an MNA with PTI, Rumina Khurshid Alam, who is an MNA with PMLN. Thank you both for taking out your time, and Javed Jadoon, who is a senior analyst. Thank you for joining us today. To start off with, I'm going to go to Mahrukh Hameed Pansota Saab. Ji, Ahmed, as far as the actions of NAB are concerned, of course, I'm sure we all know the underlying issues as far as NAB itself is concerned. The opposition has talked about it, and the government also, or to some extent, agrees on those issues. But rather than working on that, there are issues as far as accountability is concerned. There are issues as far as credibility of that same accountability. How do you see the situation?
Well, you're right. The credibility of that accountability is seriously under question. And primarily, I think the most important issue why that whole process comes under question is the power of arrest that rests with National Accountability Bureau. At the moment, there is no rational exercise of that power. What essentially NAB is doing is that it is doing a pick and choose policy, and there is absolutely no credible ground available before they actually go on to arrest somebody. I remember when Mr. Irfan Kader was the Prosecutor General NAB, there was an arrest policy which was devised. And as per that
Right.
policy, some number of people were obviously dealt differently. And then there was a complete process which was followed. Here at the moment, there is a dearth of that process. And I personally believe if that process is evolved and people, I'm mainly the subjects of NAB, which are politicians, they know that when will they be arrested, what is the legally sustainable criteria that will be followed, then I believe the overall, all these politicians will have a greater, stake in the system, and they will tend to appreciate the system more. So that, for me, as far as the National Accountability Bureau is concerned, the biggest problem. There have been arrests made in the past where people have been arrested at the inquiry stage, and then you see cases where references have been filed, but people have not been arrested. So people then tend to question the very power of Chairman NAB. The Chairman NAB's power is unquestionable, and that power has to be obviously questioned as well. Recently, Islamabad High Court has also passed some strictures on that, and they feel that it's an unfettered power which needs to be governed properly, and that can be done because under the National Accountability Ordinance, there is a power that rests with National Accountability Bureau to formulate rules. If rules can be formed on other parts and dealing with other issues, why can't rules be formed with how these cases are going to move forward and
Right.
how is the arrest going to effectively be made?
But as far as NAB, as far as other laws are concerned, because from a legal point of view, the law that governs NAB at this point, the NAB ordinance, you think it's insufficient, lacking in certain areas where it needs to be either elaborated or it needs certain, of course, it needs correction in certain areas. It needs to be rectified, and the opposition and the government have substantially agreed on this from time to time, but it never seems to happen. Why do you think that is?
I totally, I totally agree with you. This law needs a major revamping. Initially, this law was brought in a time where it was basically brought about just to do a bit of witch hunting, which is primarily the reason why there is no provision for bail application. You see, in a criminal law, in a law that deals with white collar crimes, that deals with people who have in the past either ruled, been ministers, have been at the helm of affairs, but they do not have a basic right of applying for bail. So the bail provision that they go for is generally under the constitutional jurisdiction. So I feel, first of all, and the most important is that it must have a bail or provision for bail as of right. Secondly,
Right.
latest amendments or recent amendments which were made when Mr. Farooq Naseem was the law minister, they were good amendments. And one of the amendments which where the whole process was basically explained. And when
Right.
I say the process was explained, that is in light of the Anwar Saifullah case, where it was said that not all offences constitute as an offence when it comes to National Accountability Bureau. There has to
Right.
be a conscience. There has to be a conscience effort. There has to be, Section 9(5) was further explained through an explanation. So these things which were brought in the law and many more. I'm just talking about few provisions that I have brought before you. Provision of arrest I've already dealt
Right.
with. Then even the issuance of warrant. Warrant is always issued,
Right,
but it,
Ahmed,
it is never
I will stop
provided.
you here. We will come back to you. Please stay with us. I'm going to go to Rumina Khurshid Alam. Ji, Rumina Saiba, we saw what happened with Shehbaz Sharif Saab. We saw how NAB tried to get hold of him. He got bail before arrest. All of these actions. What you have criticized. Your party has criticized the actions of NAB, of course, but you've said very vociferously what's happening is that there are other designs behind it. As far as NAB is concerned, it's actually acting at the behest of the government. All of those allegations, they're certainly not new. But why does this happen, this hot and cold? NAB finds that kind of meat to go behind, to go after your leadership, and then suddenly things slow down. What's behind that?
First of all, thank you very much, Mahrukh, for inviting me on the show. And I would really like to, through your program, I would ask everybody who's listening that we should all please take care of yourselves, and we should take care of the precautionary measures, safety measures. Well, as you have asked about the question about the NAB, I think Mr. Ahmed, he also put a very great, I do agree with him, and lots of light, of course, he has already put in the legal way. But the main thing, if you talk about our leadership, and we have all seen the behavior of the NAB, and of course, from this so long back, we are saying this, that the government and the NAB, they are just one. They are not a different department. They doesn't seem like a different department. It's like, moreover, that they are focusing only on that. And if we just put a little just eye on it, and we think that how many people though are being, they will try to make the victims of the corona, like the way they have sent the squad, the people, the policemen, and so many people, and at the end, what they have achieved from that. So it seems
But
like
in your opinion, why was such a show made? You're saying that a big show was created, a big to-do was made of the arrest, which we all saw on the screens. Why do you think that happened? What was behind this, in your opinion?
the behind was that just because they want to, I think they want to do some sort of an eye wash for the people, or to tell other people that that maybe they are going to divert the attention of the people. That's it. That there was nothing in it, because very next day it was very obvious. The very next day he was having a hearing in the court of Mr. Shehbaz Sharif for the bail before arrest.
Right.
But what it was being? It was all drama was being created to make the TV shows to become the highlight of the talk shows. Otherwise, there is nothing in it. And still, if we go see that, there are so many positive cases of the corona has been appeared in the departments of the NAB. But the department which is not sincere with its own people, how they are sincere with the others. And unfortunately, they are, I don't know which way they want to take the country and the people. They are not
Back to
looking
you.
after them.
I will come back to you. I'm going to go to Ibrahim Khan Saab. He's an MNA with PTIG. Ibrahim Saab, what do you think about what happened as far as NAB is concerned? We've all we've had a discussion with you on NAB. We agree that there are issues with NAB, and that the government and the opposition, all the parties, have from time to time agreed that there are those issues. But nothing seems to come of it. It just doesn't happen as far as NAB is concerned. But why so much of show as far as the arrest of Shehbaz Sharif Saab is concerned? We saw so much of it, there was such a big deal made out of it, and a lot of people were saying even at that time, if we were talking to legal experts, they were of the opinion that he would likely get bail before arrest. That was the opinion of the combined opinion of the legal minds as far as his situation was concerned. He said he was a cancer patient. He said that he was also, afraid of what was happening, of course, with COVID-19. So why did it happen, in your opinion?
I look at it from a different perspective. I think she was right that this was a show off, and NAB was in fact taking a nap. And if they really wanted to arrest him, there was no way. They could have easily, arrested him.
Right. So they just wanted to create that kind of, it was optics, in your opinion.
It was optics, and it was who favors, in whose favor does it go? It's in favor of Shahbaz Sharif. Who was there, present at the High Court, and he had only, my point is, if there were masses, if he was such a popular leader in Punjab at the moment, there should have been people on the road, protesting like this is not fair. But you see, there were only like 10 to 12 people. And I watched that another TV program with Imran Khan. He was saying that out of those 12, even 2 were gone, and there are only 10 left, and there are more police and media is there to give it a projection. I think.
But there was a lot of media present there, of course,
Sure.
covering the arrest.
Absolutely.
And
there
you're
was
saying,
no arrest.
But regardless of whether there were, his supporters were there or not, and how big a leader, that's a separate question. But the opposition is saying, and particularly the PMLN is saying, that it was to divert the attention from the crisis at this time, from the decisions of the government at this time, from opening up the economy and the rising cases of the COVID-19. They're trying to actually say that one is the reason for the other, if I'm putting this right.
Okay, let me put it this way.
Right.
He is not that whale fish which would have come out and eaten up all the corona and all the economic issues of Pakistan.
But it did divert the people for a while.
He came from England all the way here to get involved with the people and be able to help others, and which he didn't. At that time, wasn't he a cancer patient before? Wasn't he 69 years of age before? Coming to
but he doesn't
Pakistan.
Want to, yeah,
but you see, the thing is,
right.
it's just another way of giving them an opportunity to be on the TV. And if NAB wanted to arrest him before he reached High Court, NAB could have easily done that. And he was there with Rana Sanawallah. And I don't see any reason behind it that the government wanted to divert the attention.
You're saying
the
that
government
NAB did it on its own, for what reason?
NAB is an independent institution, and
they
venture
wanted to
out.
Catch him, they would have done so. So
yes,
in the absence of that,
they venture out into their, whatever their legal requirements or their motives are behind it. It's, they're an independent institution.
You keep saying that. The government keeps saying that they're independent, and I will come to that. I'm going to go to Javed Jadoon Saab. Javed Saab, as far as the situation is concerned, the way things are going at this time, the opposition is saying that it is to divert attention. The numbers, of course, clearly are on the rise. We are, at this time exhibiting a peak of the coronavirus. There's no denying that. It is a situation in that sense. But do you think that it was something that could have been done to divert the attention of the people at this time?
Thank you very much, Mahrukh. Without any doubt, COVID-19 is a major health issue in Pakistan and, of course, globally. The pandemic is taking every government's time to focus upon it and to address and stem this deadly virus from spreading exponentially and damaging countries' economies and the healthcare system, etc. And but here we are talking about whether it was justified by the NAB to call the leader of the opposition, Mr. Shahbaz Sharif, for answering certain questions.
No,
I think there was nothing wrong.
I'm saying that also is important considering the situation. That is, of course, another point. But my question is that Ibrahim Saab is saying that really, if NAB wanted to arrest him, and this is a popular opinion, a lot of people are saying this, they could have done so without creating that kind of show that was created for everyone to see on their screens. Why did that happen, in your opinion? Why did that show happen? And then we'll go to the second point of whether they should have called him or whether they had the right to call him. That's a separate question.
Honestly, it's very difficult to answer whether NAB really intended to arrest Mr. Shahbaz Sharif or not. I think questioning their intention would be a little premature. NAB is definitely doing what it is required to do. But I think there are certain question marks on the ability and capacity and intentions of the NAB itself. Because accountability is definitely the need of the hour. And everybody wants, including media, the intellectuals, the intelligentsia, the political leaders, the parliamentarians, the government, and even the opposition talks about accountability. But unfortunately, when the anti-graft organization goes after any particular political party leader or the group of leaders, then they start talking about witch hunt. I think we need to start the accountability. There are certain issues, certain problems with the NAB, but that doesn't mean that we should stop the accountability process at all because there is a COVID-19 going on, or maybe the people are basically staying at home mostly. But no, life is getting normal now. The political leadership like Mr. Shahbaz Sharif should have no excuses to hide behind COVID-19 because it is going to harm his political stature.
But the High Court certainly thought that he had a reason because he did get bail before arrest.
Mahrukh, once again, I would say, judging anyone on the basis of the issue of COVID-19, coronavirus going out or not, maybe there could be a middle way as well. Maybe NAB could sort of go for the virtual session as well. But my point is a bit different. What I'm talking about is running away from accountability process doesn't I think it doesn't befit a person like Mr. Shahbaz Sharif. When they talk about accountability, when they talk about a clean governance during their 30 years or so staying in power in Pakistan, and when it comes to accountability, I mean, they can always, because look what really happened the other day. The courts, the Lahore High Court did grant protective bail to Mr. Shahbaz Sharif. I think arrest or no arrest. But the problem with Pakistan is now, we are definitely off the mark. Accountability is nowhere to be seen. I think, in my personal opinion, accountability should be done of everyone in Pakistan, whether somebody is with the government or somebody is in the
Javed
opposition.
Saab, I'll come back to you. I'm going to go to Mohammad Ahmed Pansota Saab. Ahmed, I hope you can hear me. As far as this charge is concerned, one thing that I want clarity on, as legal clarity on, is this assets beyond means. This is an issue, this is a case which, or a term which seems to crop up every time NAB wants to take an action. And then it seems to loop all of these cases together under assets beyond means. And anything that they find, they say that, how does this connect to, this connects to assets beyond means, and can you prove it? Can you tell us, legally speaking, how does that work? Is it a blanket sort of charge which they can put anything under? How does it work legally?
No, it's not a blanket charge as such. You see, its situation is very simple. There are various judgments on the point which explain what asset beyond means would essentially mean. Okay, you just go and prove it. There are things that property, first of all, has the time at which that property was bought, whether the person was in power, whether some influence was used, and there are various other factors. There is no blanket way of sort of investigating asset beyond means. But you see, the problem lies, and why I keep coming back to that issue again and again, is that when does the National Accountability Bureau actually feel they need to confine somebody to make some sort of an investigation? My point is there was a chance that Shahbaz Sharif, or anybody else for that matter, could have answered all of these questions that NAB wanted to pose him with, either on Skype or any other medium. why was the or what was the need to sort of arrest him when we have got Supreme Court judgment of Sugram Bibi, we've got Justice Asif Said Khosa and many other Supreme Court judges explaining in detail that you only need to arrest somebody when A, there is sufficient material available, and B, that person is required for investigation. If somebody is willing to cooperate with you in terms of investigation, there is documentary evidence available which he is willing to supply. There are other documents available which he is willing to supply. He is not shying away from appearance, which in unfortunately in Shehbaz Sharif's case, he was sort of shying away for the last two appearances. Then I don't see any reason to apprehend somebody, especially in these COVID times, which in itself is a ground. And there is no point in sort of putting people up together in one compound and increasing the chances of COVID contraction. So I personally believe this has to be devised. Asset beyond means, even otherwise, under the National Accountability Bureau, the jurisprudence on this point is very bleak. You don't have too many convictions on this point. Majority of these convictions have eventually been set aside. So this in itself is quite a flimsy, I would say, a part of the National Accountability Bureau ordinance. But nonetheless, since it's part of the law, we have
But
to
don't you
respect
think that
that.
this is
But yes,
this is
processes have to
like
be
you're
adopted.
saying that it's a flimsy charge, but isn't it used more often than not to in your opinion, is it used more often than not to victimize whoever is in the opposition? Isn't it one of those terms which
Well,
is frequently used in your opinion?
well, evidence speaks to that effect, and I'll have to agree with you on that. That even in the past, if you see any form of national accountability bureaus that have been created in this country since years, such sort of asset beyond means, and this particular section has been the most misused section. I don't say that this section is completely flimsy and completely useless. This section is also very important. A politician or a public office holder must not have asset beyond his means which he cannot explain. The law has to be very clear, but this law must also come with judgments, jurisprudence, explanations, which I believe there is an acute dearth of that, especially as far as this part of the law is concerned. And thus it gives NAB with open ended powers to use that. Plus, there is no check and balance on that. Courts from time to time try and talk some sense into it. They also try and speak to the investigators. Cases are brought in the court. But at the end of the day, people who are at the helm of the affairs in National Accountability Bureau, all these politicians, which includes the people from the government, they are all at the mercy of National Accountability Bureau. This, I believe, is too much power entrenched in National Accountability Bureau, especially when a law which requires most of it, which is documentary evidence. I don't think so. It should be that draconian.
But
The
do you think
people should be
it's
punished.
more a chance? Each government sort of thinks about themselves when they're in power, and they think about a NAB as, like you're saying, as a tool. And then when they're then every opposition is of course at the behest of that same power every time. It's like a rigmarole. It happens every time a government goes. And with this government, as far as the PTI is concerned, we saw some movement as far as amendment of the NAB ordinance is concerned. Isn't that true?
Yes, I think PTI government has obviously taken a decisive step in terms of revamping this.
Right. Right. I'm going
Past, there
to
have been
go
times
to
when they
Rumina
were
Khurshid
when there
Alam
weren't
ji.
any
Rumina, we've, as far as PTI is concerned, Ibrahim Khan Saab is saying that, as big a leader as Shehbaz Sharif Saab is, he was not something, his was not a case which could have been used as a diversion. He was not as big a leader that he could have been been used, or his arrest could have been used as a diversion. This whole debacle happened because NAB wanted to arrest him, but they could have arrested him if they really wanted to. So this is what he's saying. In your opinion, of course, 2 days of that kind of movement, that's all that it bought the government. So it doesn't really seem to have been successful as far as diversion is concerned, if actually that is what the government intended.
Well, first of all, Mahrukh, he is my honorable member as well. Of course, we are the colleagues in the parliament. But I have honestly, I do respect that this is so funny that saying that it is not being used, or they were just little few people are there. Do you think the people only matters? And what about that day when he went for the appearance in the court for the bail thing to the court, and so many people are there? And I just want to know that the leader which he is talking or they belong, is he a leader who is putting everybody in the threat? And why all the time NAB is all the time doing or pursuing only the people of the opposition? And then you're talking about that leader who came from UK and he is willing to do each and every cooperation. He is there to do the cooperation. But can you tell me, okay, fine, we are wrong. But can you tell me that Mr. Honorable Prime Minister, when he appears to the Parliament, if as a health minister or as being a person who is answerable, like how many times he appear in the Parliament and to tell the people about the situation, every time he's saying no, NAB is independent. But no, we have seen several times, not several times, every time that the opposition is being victimized. Only the opposition is being victimized. How many people from the government, when they've been caught, when they've been asked, or their names in some fishy thing, where are they? They've been offered something, another big ministry. Okay, you have done this. Now go and get it. This. So excuse me, these are the double standards.
Right. I will come back to you. Gee, Ibrahim Saab, is it, she's talking about selective accountability, which is something that, which the opposition has always been talking about. What about
It's really not. You see, two of our ministers, Aleem Khan and the one from the Miawali, they both were arrested and detained by NAB for a couple of months, and later on they were released once.
But Ibrahim Khan Sahab, it's a simple question. This is what Ahmed Pansota Sahab is also saying, legally speaking, and I think this is what led the High Court to give him bail before arrest. If he's willing to answer the questions, and there are judgments to this effect that he could have done them on, he could have answered those questions on Skype, or he could have, he didn't need to be present. They didn't need to arrest him. They didn't need to make a show of it. Then why did it happen?
Very simple. He was called upon. I mean, they summoned him basically 2 or 3 times. He did not appear in the court. I mean,
you're saying that it's normal procedure which was followed.
A part of a constitutional department, and it works with his own premises.
Right.
And if somebody just
Ibrahim Khan Sahab, we keep talking about how, we've been talking about it since your government came in, about how NAB, reform of NAB is on the cards, as is reform of a lot of other institutions. We talk about judicial reform, we talk about police reform. The PTI has stood for it. They've always talked about it. Of course, we are in the midst of a crisis. There's no denying that, and the government is trying to deal with that.
Right.
But why is the reform, as far as NAB law is concerned, always pushed to the back burner? I mean, if there is an agreement on it, really, why doesn't the government get to it?
I mean, it's not only the government's responsibility. Then opposition could also table a bill where both of them could agree.
But in a larger sense, the larger responsibility does lie with you.
You see, right now, there is, almost a hung parliament. Okay, PTI does not have a 2/3 majority to pass laws. Pakistan Muslim League
but why don't you try and bring the rest of the opposition on board?
All I am saying is Pakistan Muslim League N had the best opportunity,
of course,
to bring about the changes they wanted to make, amendments in the law regarding NAB. They chose not to while having 2/3 majority in the assembly. Now the same thing is when coming back to haunt them.
Which can happen now with you also if in the future.
If we are committing blunders of financial mismanagement or of financial transaction of billions and billions of rupees, we should be held responsible.
Right.
You see, 17 billion rupees were converted into, I'm from a servant to another servant to Mr. Shahbaz Sharif to his sons.
As far as NAB law is concerned, why do we need this piece of legislation which is flawed to govern to govern us in this way, to be used as a tool in this way every time by whoever's in the government? That's my question. I'll come back to you. Gee, Rumina, according to Ibrahim Saab, I know this is a back and forth argument, and the government and the opposition are both very fond of making it. So I'll give you the opportunity. As far as NAB is concerned, you've seen, why didn't you do it? Why didn't There's no denying you guys had the better numbers. You could have done it. The PMLN could have gotten ahead and could have moved ahead and tabled a reform, but that didn't happen in your government.
Well, if you talk about in the government time, of course, you remember that in the beginning till the end, there were so many challenges which we were facing. Right now, when they got the government, that time it was not so much challenges were there. But anyways, if you talk that time, so I would really like to tell you that it was being like, our leadership was being asked so many times. The cases were in the NAB and so many other things. And when somebody from the parties and different people asked to do the things, where nobody was willing to sit there. But now this time, when we all were here, now if they're saying, did they want to bring any changes? No. In the KPK, they have. Where is the NAP in the KPK? Can they answer this question? Okay, so if we talk about in the parliament, so many times things from the opposition, from the government, everybody wanted to talk on that, but unfortunately the responses are not that in the way. And of course, that time, in our time, when we are going to talk about that, we should look after the cases, we should sit and do some amendments. So that time, of course, so many questions were going to be raised at that time that, because of the leadership is going to face the cases and all that, so maybe they want to bring the changes. But right now,
I'll come back to you. I'm going to go to Ibrahim Khan Sahab. Ji, Ibrahim Sahab.
I would like to respond to her that their cases are there from the past. We did not really make any new cases against them. While now, first she was saying that it was only one-sided, that there was no, people arrested from the government side. I gave her an example of the Punjab. Now she's talking about KPK. KPK is like 5 to 7 years now total. Their cases are even before this, 10 to 15 years old cases, and I think NAB is not going to spare anyone from any party, regardless of we are in the government or not. They are taking things turn by turn. The old cases have to be addressed first, and then comes on to the later cases. And I think if there is some wrongdoing going on or have gone wrong in KPK, they will definitely be taken to the task.
Right. I'm going to go to Mohammed Ahmed Pansota Sahab with this. It's a legal question. Ji, Ahmed, as far as sparing is concerned, Ibrahim Khan Sahab is saying NAB is not going to spare anyone and it will get to everyone in the order that it does. But the point really is that NAB doesn't really have a hugely successful rate as far as its prosecution is concerned. What happens is that they invariably fall flat, and the decisions are overturned. Whatever, the investigations are not upheld. That itself is also a flaw of its investigation, or what is behind that?
Well, you've raised a very pertinent point, and I believe the prosecution at National Accountability Bureau is something which needs to be improved at the earliest. The amount of money that is being spent on this institution, that certainly requires the best prosecution in the country. Even then, they have to go and hire big lawyers for these cases, especially when it comes to big cases are concerned. So I think prosecution is one place where there is absolutely no work which is being done, which results in lack of convictions. Or even if somebody is convicted based on that prosecution, there are so many loopholes because of the documentary evidence being available and part of the record that eventually reliefs are being given at the High Court level or the Supreme Court level. So yes, and secondly, one important aspect for the party in government that is very important. I think they should stop making any statement about National Accountability Bureau, whether it is going to be performing its task well or not. That's not their job. When they say it's independent and have got spokesperson, then I don't think so any National Assembly member or from Provincial Assembly or anybody from PTI or from, let's say, the opposition, they don't even need to talk about it. They've got spokespersons. They're the ones who are supposed to
press conferences. Do you think that we need to be we need those press conferences. We need to be apprised of what's happening as far as the Sharif family investigation is concerned. If it's going to come, if it's prosecution, it should just happen in run of the mill. It should happen as per procedure, and if it gets to court, it should get to court. Instead of us having that, listening to press conferences on the investigation, being apprised of what documents have now come into the possession of NAB. Do you think those are necessary?
Well, I would say that press conference is only important if that press conference is made by Mr. Shahzad Akbar, who is obviously assisting the Prime Minister on anti-corruption. But apart from that, if there is anybody else who's willing to or who's very overwhelmingly in the opinion of making these press conferences, then I don't agree with that. Prime Minister, if says anything to that effect, that makes sense. Mr. Shahzad Akbar does so, it does make sense because PTI had obviously a mandate of anti-corruption. It makes sense. But you see, when you have people like Sheikh Rashid Saab or other federal ministers or MPs or MNAs making such statements, then that has absolutely no credence. In fact, it sort of, I would say, jeopardizes the ongoing process which is already going on, and then people from the opposition, they get the chance to sort of bring it up. And I personally believe they should refrain from making any such statement as far as the accountability process is concerned.
I really do agree with him.
Ji Ibrahim sir.
I do agree with him. I mean, other than the relevant people, I mean, not everyone should start commenting on this an independent institution and what they are going to do or what they are not, because it's not our job to sit here and make predictions. And I agree with him 100% that people from any party should not make any comments on an independent institution which is working under the premises of law.
Right.
And it can create, I mean, hurdles in their performance, or it can, in other way, I mean, influence the minds of the people.
I'm going to go to Javed Jadoon Saab. Ji, Javed Saab, as far as this whole issue of press conferences are concerned, and the fact that every time a press conference happens, then like Ahmed Pansota Saab is also saying, it gives all political parties and their members the chance to comment on it. It becomes an issue on national television, and then it maybe muddies the waters as far as NAB and its independence is concerned. Isn't that true?
I think absolutely you're right, and it makes the anti-graft body more controversial, and the accountability process more is suspect. But I think there should be a piece of advice for people like Mr. Sheikh Rashid as well, who go on television, national televisions, and they announce that there's going to be a Tarzan-like reaction from the Accountability Bureau, which makes the whole process a suspect one. Why? Because it is not the government which is conducting the accountability drive. It is the responsibility of NAB, and NAB can take up the case against the government as well. So then why make the government itself controversial by a member of the cabinet who goes on national televisions and he talks about the accountability and arresting of the opposition leaders as well? I think I totally agree with Mr. Ibrahim that there should be no comments, but similarly, it should be binding on the members of the government and cabinet as well, that they should not be commenting on whether the NAB is going to arrest certain political leaders or not. And having said that, I think what was stopping the opposition parties to sit with the government and introduce certain changes in the accountability laws so that it can be made even-handed. I strongly believe that opposition thinks that 2 years gone, 3 left, and they might have a chance to have a shot at the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf as well when it is not in power, because they believe that they have seen the worst, they have faced the heat, and let the process go on like this. And if there are certain amendments made in the laws of the National Accountability Bureau, they might not have a chance to twist arm PTI when the time comes. But I think that's a very, very bad approach on part of the opposition. If you need to have certain changes to be introduced in national accountability laws, then you need to sit sincerely with the government, and the platform is the National Assembly and the Senate. You can discuss it out and you can introduce certain changes which can make the body less controversial, and it is able to conduct across the board accountability without any biases or any favors or disfavors. So I think the opposition is equally to be blamed that they start scoring points. But when the government talks about introducing certain changes, they haven't shown any interest, and that means that they are not even sincere in introducing any changes in the National Accountability Bureau law.
Right. Thank you so much for joining us. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have. Thank you so much for being with us. Mohammad Ahmed Pansota Saab, thank you for joining us. Ibrahim Khan Saab, thank you for being with us today. Rumina Khurshid Alam, thank you for joining us today. Javed Jadoon Saab, thank you for your input. As far as the question of NAB is concerned, each time a leader is arrested from the opposition, the same questions crop up. The same issues are raised. We discuss the independence of NAB, we discuss and the opposition retaliates by saying why are actions not being taken by members of the, against members of the government that are under investigation. Same questions flow back and forth between the opposition and the government. The real question is, if there is sincerity as far as the issue of NAB law is concerned, as far as amendment is concerned, then why are those amendments inevitably delayed in every government's tenure? Of course, PTI's government is it's the first time that they're in government, and there has been talk of amendment, there has been talk of reform, not only with regard to NAB law, but also with regard to police reform, with regard to judicial reform, and the government says that it wants to get to it. But the point is that with the numbers they have, they need the cooperation of the opposition. And the government says that they don't want to play ball. Whether it's the government or the opposition, if we want a change in law, if we don't want the same repetitive mistakes that keep happening with every tenure, then we need to have sincere opposition and government. We need for them to sit together. We need for them to devise, come up with the amendments that need to be made in this law, so that the law cannot be used as a tool in any government's hand. Let's hope that the government and the opposition can do that. That said, of course, we're in the midst of a huge crisis as far as COVID-19 is concerned. Social responsibility at this time is something that should be the highest on anyone's priority list. And let's hope that we can all be socially responsible at this time. Let's hope that we can do this, we can take the kind of measures that are needed for us to get through this. We talk about other nations in the world opening up their economies, but we have to have that level of responsibility also. We have to be responsible for our own safety. We have to be responsible for other people's safety. We have to socially isolate ourselves as much as we can. We have to limit our outdoors activities as much as we can. There are no two ways of looking at this. The numbers are on the rise. Protect yourselves, protect your family, take the necessary measures. Thank you so much for joining us today on Perspective. Thank you.